Welcome everyone to this new episode of the Privacy Rules Privacyespresso series, a series where we go through the latest news from all over the world on privacy, data protection, and cybersecurity. Today with me, I have Oksana Zadniprovska from Axon Partners, a law firm member of the Alliance from Ukraine, in order to discuss about some developments and news related in particular to AI and the changes and the vision of Ukraine on this specific sector. So we know that in the EU a lot is happening, but we don't know very much about Ukraine in this regard. So Oksana, can you first of all give us an overview? For example, is there an AI law in Ukraine?
Sure. Hi, Alessandro. I think it's really nice that we are going to talk about Ukraine today because, well, as you know, yesterday the official negotiations between Ukraine and the EU has started, and it was the opening of accession negotiations. And today's topic is also a little bit about the EU perspective and the EU values in Ukraine. So currently we do not have the law on AI governance or the principles, but the Ukrainian delegation, for example, took part in the development of the Convention of the Council of Europe on AI and human rights. And also there is a governmental roadmap on AI regulation in Ukraine. So in October last year, 2023, the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine has published this roadmap. And it provides that the AI regulation process in Ukraine would include two stages. The first stage is the pre-legislative track, and the second one is the legislative track. So the pre-legislative, during this pre-legislative track, the government will facilitate and promote drafting of sectoral recommendations, and also the government will be preparing the establishment of the AI regulatory sandbox. And this was the plan for 2023-2024, but it seems like the plan is going to move forward for the next few years too. And as to the legislative track, so after the AI Act in Europe was adopted a few months ago, Ukraine had to start working on the draft legislation, which is in compliance with the AI Act because of the wish to become part of the EU. And this stage is also about learning from others' mistakes, let's say. So there is no registered draft law yet, but since the AI Act and its implementation has already started, so the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine declares that their idea is to take all the best from the implementation of other AI laws, especially the EU law, and gradually implement best practices into the Ukrainian draft law. They are not in a rush. They want to move slowly, checking in with business and their interests. And no hurry is especially important with AI regulation in the war times, because we need modern technologies to gain advantage over the Russian millions army. So we need technology to freely develop. But of course, respecting human rights is always a priority.
This is very interesting to hear, in particular, the last point of combining human rights, but also the need of developing, of course, AI. I mean, I remember the big discussion we had in Italy when there was the ban of ChatGPT. There was nothing compared to your situation. So I can imagine how pressing is this topic, and finding the right balance in countries like in Ukraine, and that is facing a war situation. In this regard, what's going on? You were mentioning about a pre-legislative track. So what's going on with that track? And was there, like in Ukraine, already something related to AI before this draft law coming? And as a last question, I will shut all of them immediately. Is there any recommendation in this regard that you have for businesses in Ukraine with regard to use of AI?
Mm-hmm. Starting from the first part, I would say that except for this roadmap, the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine has developed a so-called white book. In such a way, they aim to provide for a detailed description of the approach of Ukraine to the AI regulation, and as well as help businesses to understand how to prepare for future requirements related to the AI market. And by the way, this white book was published exactly today, the 26th of June. It is open for discussions and comments for 3 months from today. And I've already read it, and here what I think you should know. So the first is that there are 3 main purposes of AI regulation in Ukraine. These are the purpose to support business competitiveness, to protect human rights, and everything with regard to the euro integration. also 45% of Ukrainians who were surveyed believe that we need the law on AI in Ukraine. We need to regulate it. And ministry think that AI in the military sphere shall not be regulated due to national interest of the state within this framework. So they are postponing this sphere a little bit, but are talking about the regulation of AI in general. And AI shall also be regulated by specific laws if it is not about AI in general, but for example, in the IP sphere, the intellectual property sphere, the intellectual property law should regulate AI separately. So this is one of their ideas. And also, of course, personal data protection laws should be respected anyway, because we already have the rule, for example, on automated decision making, which is working similar to how it works in the EU. And one of the main instruments that was described in this white book is the AI regulatory sandbox. This is a sort of controlled environment in which business can receive help from the state to adapt its AI products to future legislation. So also there should be a portal for responsible AI use from the ministry. So the ministry wants to allow the businesses to go through the risk assessment methodology developed and adapted to our realities, to join the code of conduct, to apply for this regulatory sandbox that I mentioned, or to enroll for the education course on AI, for example. So as you see, there are certain instruments offered for discussion, and there are 3 months for business to react somehow, for business and organizations, of course. Because there could be some NGOs interested in this sphere too. And as to the recommendations for businesses, the second question that you have asked, so today we could discuss at least one of the recommendations from the government that we have for media, for journalists, because this is the very first piece of recommendations advertised by the government. There would be more. But as of now, these are the only ones publicly available. So they are not law itself, of course. They are soft law, but still they assist in proper application of best practices in the development or use of the technologies. And it seems to me that on the basis of these recommendations, it's easy to understand what are the main principles that our government sees should be implemented in the practice of any business, not only media. But anyway, so in January 2024, like this year, 5 months ago, this expert committee on AI development of our Ministry of Digital Transformation, together with NGO, which is called Digital Security Lab, they have prepared these recommendations for journalists and on the responsible and safe use of AI in their sphere. And this document provides recommendations for journalists, for media, for producing, publishing, and verifying content using AI systems. So journalists could use AI for different purposes. And it advises journalists to adhere to their code of ethics of Ukrainian journalists and to respect additional principles that we privacy lawyers are used to. So this is the principle of lawfulness, non-discrimination, risk assessment, data protection, informing on the use of AI, human oversight, etc. And these recommendations includes the general idea, of course, that the AI should not breach human rights. So media shall teach their employees how to responsibly use AI, how to adhere to this basic professional ethics standards. And also transparency is really, really important. So media should disclose information on when, how, and why they are using these AI systems. For instance, in their policy standards, in their strategies on their website. So they should also clearly mark which content is AI generated and which is not. And anyway, the media and journalists will be responsible for the content they have published, whether they have used AI for this purpose or not. So now we are also waiting from the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine to publish some other recommendations for other sectors. They are promising it in their white book. This is in progress, so we are waiting for them patiently.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Oksana. That's incredibly interesting also because, considering speaking with your colleagues all over the world, Ukraine is more or less trying to keep peace with all the other countries moving on with AI as well. And I could hear, some key elements. First of all, there are some principles that are shared, and normally when we speak about principles and relevant thoughts behind certain law proposal or documentation provided by governments, those principles remain. Even if you develop laws and you change certain part of it, the key principles are always there. So, this is probably the best way to start approaching new sectors, in particular something like AI that change on a daily basis. Part of it, I'm listening to you, is privacy rights, as well as many other human rights that are key elements of any law, in particular for countries that want to align with the EU, as Ukraine is doing. So I see a path in that direction. It's very interesting to see that Ukraine is giving a lot of responsibility to companies handling and using AI, meaning, be sure on how you're using those type of technologies. Of course, they can be used for the good, and they must be used for the good, but also in the right way. So this was extremely interesting. Thanks a lot for providing us with this overview on what's happening in Ukraine on this. And thanks a lot for your time, to you and also our listeners for being with us today. And yes, Oksana, I'm really much look forward to hearing back from you with some news and the next updates from Ukraine in this regard, and many others, as a lot of development from there.
Sure. Thank you, Alessandro.
Thank you very much, and see you all with the next episode. Bye, everyone.